Welcome, everyone, to the National Infrastructure Bank's Zoom meeting with regard to how we will stop the recession dead in its tracks with the National Infrastructure Bank. Tonight, we have several prominent guests throughout the entire country that's going to be joining us and describing their advocacy with regard to a national infrastructure bank. And as we all appreciate and understand following current events, there's now a situation where federal funding with regard to these kinds of projects are in crisis. And where will the funding come from in order to rebuild our national infrastructure bank, national infrastructure system? We advocate that it's a national infrastructure bank, which has been employed 4 times in the past, and we want to advocate for its creation for a 5th time. Joining us tonight as our first speaker is our economist, who will explain the system and the manner by which the bank functions and operates. And welcome Alphecca Muttardy to our Zoom meeting tonight, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome to all of you. If you're first-time attendees to this kind of a meeting, we want to brief you on our National Infrastructure Bank proposal, but I also want to say something about where we are on the economy. So the sort of the bad news is our economy is really shifting or tilting over towards a recession. In the last month or so, we've seen that consumer sentiment has fallen, especially over the last 20, I think that's supposed to be weeks, and spending is slowing. That's not good news, because spending is the only thing that's kept our economy afloat until now. Inflation is not quite under control, and the Fed has decided not to lower interest rates for the time being. Meanwhile, the government's new policies could actually trigger a recession. That's been called by Mark Zandi, who's the head of Moody Analytics. He doesn't think it's going to be stagflation. He thinks we're tilting toward a recession. What you can see in the economy is high national debt, high interest payments on the debt, actually greater than defense spending. This new administration wants to cut the budget everywhere because its main intention is to lower taxes, and we're already running at budget deficits of $2 trillion a year. The Investment and Infrastructure and Jobs Act is not fully lent out. It's due to expire next year, but it's only about 1/3 or so lent out. And it'll be a challenge to reauthorize it. And even the existing spending has been cut back and not delivered as promised from the budget. And then there's the problem of tariffs. These are huge tariffs. We're now in a trade war. We have had different rounds of retaliation of one raises and then the other country raises their tariffs. And this is really bad for everybody. It causes business uncertainty. It adds to inflation. It actually caused the Great Depression. If any of you are history buffs, I recommend you look on Wikipedia at the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, which really led to the Great Depression. As a result of all this, Moody's has now maintained its negative rating on our U.S. economy, even though it still has our treasury bonds at AAA rated, but that may change. Who knows? Meanwhile, so the National Infrastructure Bank is the only way out of this, given where we are. It can double long-term economic growth. That's what happened the last time we had a bank like this, called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation under Herbert Hoover and FDR. The NIB will lend for projects that hire workers and buy inputs. It can double GDP growth. It has emergency provisions. For example, during a recession, can hire up workers quickly, and we can do targeted emergency projects like removing all those lead water service lines. And for every dollar the NIB lends, it creates $3 of new GDP. So as many of you may know, our NIB is targeted to providing $5 trillion in project lending in 20 infrastructure categories. Those are to repair transportation systems, water systems, upgrade the power grid, build high-speed rail, broadband everywhere, affordable housing, large-scale water projects, all of this in an integrated fashion where we could do better development planning for our infrastructure in the country. So that's that led to the size of the infrastructure bank at 5 trillion. However, the American Society of Civil Engineers 2 days ago just released their new 2025 report card. They do one every 4 years. And what they have now shown is that the unfinanced gap for infrastructure has grown to 3.7 trillion, up from the last time they had a report card at 2.6 trillion. That's a 40% increase in the unfunded gap for infrastructure in just 4 years. And the gap grew the most for energy, the power grid, drinking, wastewater, stormwater systems, roads and bridges. Even though the IIJA had most of its money going to roads and bridges, still that unfinanced gap went up despite the presence of the IIJA, and a big gap for schools as well. So the lesson here is the longer we wait to fix our infrastructure, the bigger the financing gap becomes. And you can really see this in any everyday infrastructure problems around the country. Look at this one. This is a cargo ship striking the Key Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland, which brought the bridge down because the pillars were not protected from a strike from a boat like this. Even though it had been recommended that they should be protected. If we wouldn't have lost $30 billion worth of bridge if we had done that preventive maintenance. And just last week, the National Transportation Safety Board came out with a new report that 68 other bridges around the United States are in a similar vulnerable position and need to have risk assessments and action taken to protect them. So that's why we need a national infrastructure bank stat. Really, this is a critical matter. We could go into a recession and we have infrastructure that can fail all over the place. So the bill we intend to reintroduce into Congress this spring. We're actively seeking more members of Congress to come on to the bill. All of you can help with this because everybody has members of Congress in their area. Just call them up, tell them to come on board and sponsor whatever the new bill number. It'll get a new bill number in the new Congress, but it's the National Infrastructure Bank Act. At least $5 trillion are needed, maybe more, to fix our aging infrastructure. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alphecca. And next, we're going to move on to have Ellen Brown make her presentation. Ellen is an author and the founder of the Public Banking Institute in Los Angeles, California, and is an expert on public banking. And welcome back, Ellen. A pleasure to have you again.
So, as Alphecca points out, we have a serious federal debt crisis. The federal debt is $36.2 trillion, and you can see from this chart, it's rising exponentially, which is a serious problem. Interest on it is 1.2 trillion, which is more than even military spending. The projected deficit, Alphecca said 2, but I've heard 2.5 trillion. Anyway, it's a lot. So even if, originally Elon Musk thought that he could cut 2 trillion, but now he's saying 1 trillion is more realistic for his Department of Government Efficiency. So even if they cut 1 trillion, there's still a $1.5 trillion deficit. So that means the debt will keep growing along with the interest. So we've got a serious problem there. And the way we can cure the deficit, we're not going to cure the debt, but anyway, we can eliminate the deficit by raising GDP, which is actually doable by new infrastructure, as Alphecca also pointed out. I guess you can't see that chart too well, but so debt to GDP is also rising exponentially. You can't see the chart, but on the right-hand side, it's showing where it will go if we keep on in our current trajectory, and it's, exponential, going straight up. So, but it can be cured by increasing GDP. As we saw, you can see in this chart that during World War II, debt to GDP was as high as it is right now. but it came back down. So how did that happen? It was because of all the infrastructure created in the 1930s and 1940s through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which generated all sorts of manufacturing and development during those decades. And we can do that again. Infrastructure investment fell off in the 1970s when available resources were sucked into the Vietnam War. So war is always a problem. So this is still the situation today. We're not technically at war, but military expenditures are way up there at nearly $1 trillion. Versus infrastructure at only 126 billion in the last, or fiscal year 2024, 1/40th of what was spent on the military. And now we have a debt ceiling problem, so we need some form of off-budget financing, which the National Infrastructure Bank is. We can escape the debt trap by growing our way out of it on the Hamiltonian model. So Treasury Secretary Hamilton, our first US Treasury Secretary, had a similar problem. He was grappling with war debt. By the end of the Revolutionary War, the colonies turned states were $44 million in debt. Hamilton solved the problem with debt for equity swaps. State debt was accepted in partial payment for stock in the first US bank, paying a 6% dividend. And that's similar also to the National Infrastructure Bank model. The bank leveraged this capital into credit, issued as the first US currency. Loans were based on the fractional reserve model. Hamilton wrote, "It is a well-established fact that banks in good credit can circulate a far greater sum than the actual quantum of their capital in gold and silver." The primary function of the bank for the first US bank was to issue credit to the government and private interests for internal improvements and other economic development, according to Hamilton's system of public credit. So in effect, it was a national infrastructure and development bank, and so was the second US bank, during which a great deal of development occurred, including the Erie Canal was built in that period. But President Jackson waged war on it and shut it down. And so the country was left without a national bank or national currency. And we got struck with the panic of 1837. And Lincoln, who was at the then legislator Lincoln in Illinois, he was a defender and a champion of infrastructure development and a national banking system. So he defended the Illinois State Bank, chartered in 1835, as essential for economic stability. He championed government-supported infrastructure projects and was instrumental in passage of the Illinois Internal Improvements Act of 1837, which relied on state bonds and loans from the bank. In 1860, he became the first Republican Party president, where he continued to push for infrastructure investments to unite and strengthen the nation. Like Washington and Hamilton, Lincoln was faced with a crippling war debt in the Civil War. The British bankers were, if they were willing to lend, but at very high interest rates. So in effect, we would be trapped in debt, virtually recolonized by debt. So to avoid that, Lincoln returned to the what was called the American system of the American colonists and just printed paper money, paper greenbacks, effectively doubling the money supply. He also signed the 1863 and 1864 National Banking Acts. Under those acts, the idea was to turn the state banks into national banks. And in order to join the system, they had to capitalize their banknotes in part with government debt. So it's another system of using debt for capital. These new monies funded the Civil War effort and rapid economic development, including completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, which was begun under the Pacific Railway Act of 1862, another one of Lincoln's favorite projects. Factory output boomed. Mechanization allowed agriculture to flourish, despite the fact that 1 million men were under arms. And the money supply was doubled, but did not trigger price inflation. Why not? Supply and demand went up together. The Hamiltonian model was also used in the Great Depression when US banks were bankrupt. Undersecretary of Commerce Jesse Jones, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, founded by President Hoover, was repurposed to fund development. They started with a modest $500 million in capitalization, issued bonds, lent or invested over $50 billion from that $500 million over the next 25 years. So actually, they issued bonds, which most of which were bought by the federal government, funded the New Deal in World War II, rebuilt the depressed economy, and returned a net profit to the government. Post-war prosperity created a U.S. middle class that was the envy of the world. Again, GDP came up to meet the debt. And this is the solution to a federal debt crisis: increased productivity. Like in the Great Depression, crises are when politicians are open to major changes. We can rebuild the country, restore a middle class, and create a 21st century renaissance by passing HR 4052 or whatever the new number is, the National Infrastructure Bank. Thank you. That's all I got. Oops.
Thank you very much, Alan. Next, we're going to give an opportunity for local public officials who I suggest and believe have the best understanding of what the needs are of our infrastructure, economic consequences are. And I'm very happy to introduce to you first the elected official Craig Wilcox, who's a state senator from the 32nd Senate District in Illinois. He serves as minority spokesperson for the Veterans Affairs and Labor Committees, along with others that he serves in performing. He spent 24 years serving in the United States Air Force as commander of the 89th Airlift Support Group at Joint Base Andrews, Maryland. And there he led a unit providing global command and control communications for the President of the United States and Air Force One. He obtained an electrical engineering degree in 1989. So this is a person that is smart, accomplished, and knows about national security and has a vision for our country as an elected official that we want to hear. And we welcome you here tonight. Senator Wilcox, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. I probably should have cut you off a little bit there before you get my head swelling too much. So in Illinois, we have Senator Kaler, who's filed a resolution requesting and urging Congress to pass the National Infrastructure Bank. I was asked to take a look at it. I can have a devil's advocate premonition or contrarian views. So what I really was looking for was all of the negatives for a national infrastructure bank and historical analysis of why this wouldn't work. And it's not something that you easily find. So I started to be swayed and go, okay, let's look at the claims of the positive and why this has the potential to be the economic boon. And over the course of the past month, became convinced this probably is a great idea for the country. So I signed on. The resolution still is just Senator Kaler and myself. I just texted Senator Kaler to see if he intends to revise the resolution, knowing that the ASCE 2025 report card is out, and obviously we'll need a new House bill number when that gets filed. But there were some aspects that, I kind of dug into, and a few trends that I don't know as though we've talked about, but I'm seeing some local and wondering if they're applying nationally. I'm getting concerned because a number of local municipalities are being coaxed into selling their public infrastructure to try and resolve some of their debt issues. And that worries me that public dollars and public investments over the course of decades is going to be, kind of bought up by private investment. So I know that if the private investment is willing to do this, that there are benefits to increased infrastructure. And it scares me that this is an easy way out for some municipalities. I think it's short-sighted. So we'll be interested to see how much you touch on that here in the future. One of the questions that I've got to ask myself is, with a national infrastructure bank and a boon in infrastructure projects, where is the American workforce sit? Are we as a nation ready to get back to building things? I think the answer is yes, but I want to make sure that my concern is that we don't become one of those countries with grand ideas and it requires immigration to provide the workforce. I spent time around the world with the military, and I always hated to hear that, oh, we're going to do a contract with a TCN, a third country national, meaning that the workforce in some countries is truly imported for the nature of work and then sent back and often not treated well. So that would be one concern I have as we go forward, to make sure protections are in place or that our labor market is truly prepared to take on the task. The biggest benefit that I think I came to realize with a national infrastructure bank is that it would span timelines that significantly outpaced the political pendulum and potentially swing from administration to administration. So I was happy to sign on to the resolution. We go back to Springfield next week, and I'll be trying to encourage other senators to sign on and hope that resolution gets called. Open to any questions, but I did a big dive with a potential negative outlook and was not able to support that. So
Thank you so much, Senator. We will get back to the topics of your questions that you've raised, which are excellent, including the labor market perspective, which we think is very, very important. Our next speaker that we are pleased and happy to have join us is Sly James, who has a multitude of skills, including being a band leader, a military police officer, a trial attorney, and someone who was the mayor of Kansas City, and also an award-winning author. During this time of public service, he constructed and expanded the streetcar line, an over $800 million infrastructure package, and was one of the first cities in the country to create and employ the Smart City Initiative. He graduated cum laude from Rockhurst College and then went on to get his law degree at the University of Minnesota. We're very pleased and welcome you, Sly James, to our Zoom call tonight. Thank you, Sly.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the overly expansive and kind introduction. I don't have anything to show you in terms of slides or things of that nature, but I do have a story to tell you. I was elected mayor in 2011. The very first meeting I had of any significance outside of my office and city was the 2011 U.S. Conference of Mayors in Baltimore, which led to a meeting at the White House with President Obama and Vice President Biden, mayors from around the country, Antonio Villaraigosa, Michael Nutter, Michael Johnson, Anthony Fox, and others, where we talked for an hour and 15 minutes about infrastructure bank. I was kind of the new kid on the block and kind of my head was swimming, so I did a lot of listening. However, I came away with a greater understanding of the need for an infrastructure bank than I had had previously. During the time that I was mayor, we tried to govern based on facts and data. And one of the facts and data portals that we used was a business satisfaction survey and a citizen satisfaction survey. Two separate surveys asking different questions relative to each of those sectors. The business satisfaction survey, the number one thing, you might think it might be crime or something like that, but in reality, it was infrastructure. They were concerned about infrastructure. Citizen satisfaction survey always listed streets, roads, bridges, and sidewalks as major points of interest for them. We use that data down the road in order to leverage an $800 million bond to repair streets, roads, bridges, and sidewalks in our city. That one act alone, although it was somewhat difficult to achieve, particularly with our credit agencies wanting us to do something much smaller. But in light of the fact that when I came into office, we had $2 billion worth of delayed maintenance, deferred maintenance, I thought it was important for us to take on this challenge, and has had a great effect. It's had the impact of increasing property values of our citizens whose homes and sidewalks have been repaired, streets have been repaired, etc. The very first big project that we undertook was to start a streetcar system in Kansas City with a 2.2 mile starter line downtown that has in effect generated a few $billions of runoff income from the development that's taken place. It's now being expanded to about 6 miles, and every vacant parcel. This is very interesting. All the vacant parcels along that line, running from the riverfront down to the plaza, have been snatched up, renovated, or torn down with new buildings going up. So it's creating economic activity just by that act alone. And I have a broad definition of what infrastructure actually is. The streetcar was absolutely critical for infrastructure because it actually serves not only an infrastructure issue and a transportation issue, but it also serves an equity issue. Our streetcar line is free. You hop on, you ride. You don't have to go from point to point paying $1 one way and $1 back, which tends to limit circulating funds. But this streetcar being free, you can hop off at one corner, have a beer, get back on, ride another few blocks, have dinner, get back on, go see a movie, and circle back. That circulates money in the area, generating a lot more economic activity, which in turn generates more jobs, which in turn generates more income for our citizens, more sales taxes for the city. The final thing that I want to include in discussion of streetcar is broadband and access to broadband. We were selected as, along with Kansas City, Kansas, as one of the very first Google 1 gigabit to the home cities. That was a transformational situation that led to us becoming one of the very first smart and connected cities. It also led to an understanding of how fortunate some people were to have access to good, consistent, reliable access to the internet, and how unfortunate others were. Now, Google did something I thought was somewhat ingenious. In order for them to determine where they were going to start laying fiber initially, they divided the city into what they call fiber hoods. So one neighborhood might have 1 or 2 or 3 fiber hoods in it. And the idea is that the fiber hoods that came up with the $10 per household deposit, and the most of those would be the ones that they went to first. What we saw on the maps as we paid attention was that fiber hoods on the more middle class and upper middle class and wealthier side of town became green immediately. Those on the poorer sides of town remained in the red. So we had to do something about that. The idea here is that infrastructure can't simply be looked at as concrete and steel and things of that nature. Infrastructure has an impact on lives. And whatever happens on the federal level and the state level comes home to roost on the local level, where we have to deal with those issues, where we are accountable to our citizens as we walk into the grocery store or restaurant, and they want to know what we're doing to improve their life and their plight. The infrastructure tasks that we've taken on have been greatly successful, but they are ridiculously expensive, and they are very, very difficult for a city of over 500 square miles to be able to take on its own. Without help from the federal government, we will simply continue to fall behind and continue to have deficits and deferred maintenance, which will ultimately come home to roost as well. You can't defer maintenance forever. At some point, it simply breaks down, and now you got a real problem. An infrastructure bank is critical to not only the economy and to the workforce, but to the citizens who need infrastructure to function and be proper in their neighborhoods and cities every single day. It's also critical for businesses who rely on infrastructure in order to do what they need to do in order to create the jobs that they create. So I'm proud to be part of whatever efforts we can have in order to try to get something done on the federal level with regards to an infrastructure bank. And I'm very happy to be here with a lot of other people who feel the same way.
Mayor James, thank you for that great presentation. Your work represents the tire meeting the road as far as infrastructure is concerned, and we congratulate you on your past efforts and thank you for your support and contributions for our efforts to create a national infrastructure bank. Our next speaker is Kirkland Carden, who formerly was a county commissioner in Gwinnett County, Georgia, currently a Duluth City Council member, the first millennial and the first African-American council in the city. He has a bachelor's degree in political science from Georgia State University and also has worked on urban planning with the Jacobs Engineering Group. And while working for the Department of Transportation for Georgia the last 5 years, has assisted local governments in developing transportation plans and their needs. So you also have a great familiarity with the complexity and the challenges as far as transportation and infrastructure is concerned. And Kirkland, welcome. We're anxious to hear your presentation, and you have the floor.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everybody. And real quick, there's one thing I wanted to correct about my bio. I was a city council member back in the day, was elected in 2017. And in 2020, I was elected to the Gwinnett County Board of Commissioners. And in 2024, I was reelected to another 4-year term. So just wanted to clear that up. And I guess I'll touch on, I currently work in real estate development. So did some good work working with the Georgia DOT. But now I work in a multifamily real estate development, trying to address some of the housing challenges we're experiencing in the Southeast United States. So real quick, I currently represent District 1 in the Gwinnett County Board of Commissioners, which includes several cities, includes the city of Berkeley Lake, Norcross, Duluth, where I currently live, Peachtree Corners, and portions of Lawrenceville and portions of the city of Suwanee. So Gwinnett County is a county of just over 1 million people. We're the fastest growing county in the state of Georgia, and I represent nearly or just a little bit over 250,000 residents. And as you can imagine, as a county like us grows, so do our infrastructure needs and challenges. Metro Atlanta and Georgia as a whole needs the National Infrastructure Bank because we have a significant infrastructure deficit that was mentioned earlier in this call. According to the American Association of Civil Engineers, it's believed that that deficit is somewhere around $4 trillion shortfall. And this is a shortfall that is not covered by local governments such as ourselves. So this is money that's not programmed in our budget, right? And there's a gap. As you mentioned earlier, this is not a new or a novel idea. It's been done before in American history. There are 4 institutions that have been built in large part because of the infrastructure bank. The last time it was used, it helped finance projects directly and indirectly here in Georgia, hundreds, if not thousands of projects across your state. For example, it financed the Rural Electrification Administration, which brought electric power to all parts of rural Georgia. It built sewer systems here in Atlanta, Georgia, which at the time was the largest project in the American South. It also financed the creation of Atlanta Municipal Airport, which was the predecessor of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, which is the busiest airport in the world, the most efficient airport in the world, and something we're all very proud of here in Atlanta, Georgia. So in 2024, the civil engineers gave the state of Georgia an infrastructure grade of a C+. Coming from the DOT world, a C+ in your infrastructure, that's a state of good repair. So it's not great. That means it's failing. It's going in the wrong direction. Transit was given a grade of a D. Roads were given a C+, stormwater is C-, and wastewater a C-. Dams at a D+, aviation a C+, drinking water a C+, solid waste a C+. So it's clear to me, right, based off these grades, we got some work to do here in Georgia. Half of all Georgians do not have access to public sewer service. Wastewater needs total $2.7 billion. Statewide drinking water needs are now nearly $20 billion. The Atlanta Regional Commission, which is the metropolitan planning organization for the greater metro Atlanta region, reported an annual gap of $620 million between stormwater infrastructure needs and the funds that are programmed to provide those projects here in Metro Atlanta. According to a recent report, repairs in Metro Atlanta's aging water system will cost billions of dollars. So to my friends in neighboring DeKalb County, their needs alone is estimated to cost them $4.4 billion to help them repair their aging water system. The pipe, now maybe some of you remember this in the news last year, but there was a pipe that burst in the summer here in Atlanta, Georgia, 2024. And because of that pipe burst, a large portion of Atlanta was without water for 5 days, including Midtown, which is the central business corridor, right, of economic development in the city of Atlanta. Now, when it was found, that pipe was laid in the ground in 1883, more than 140 years ago. So as for transportation, Atlanta is known for many things, but we're also known for our traffic congestion. We have real problems with mobility here in Metro Atlanta. In fact, Metro Atlanta ranks number 8 nationally in traffic congestion. And here in Gwinnett County, county of 1 million people, these problems don't escape us as well. In fact, when it comes to our transportation system, only 11% of residents are within walking distance to a transit. And when we say walking distance, I'm really stretching. I mean within 2 miles. So it's clear to see that we need a more efficient and a more accessible transit system here in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Now, as for affordable housing, we're in the middle of a crisis here, not just in Metro Atlanta, Gwinnett County, but across our nation. But I'm going to focus here on Georgia and Gwinnett County. So in Georgia, there are more than 654,000 renters who pay more than 30% of their annual income in rent. So by the HUD definition, we would say those people are rent burden or cost burden. There is a shortage of at least 214,000 new affordable rental and housing units in the state of Georgia. And again, here in Gwinnett, 56,000 households, or 18% of our households, are classified as cost burden, while 46% of our households are classified, or 15% are classified as severely cost burden. The county faces an annual housing shortfall of 8,500 or so units. That's new affordable housing units per year. And as mentioned earlier in the call with the Economist, we're in the middle of experiencing a lack in consumer confidence. My concern, somebody from the development community, is due to a lack of consumer confidence, the development community is going to slow down. We're seeing a decrease in rezoning requests here in Gwinnett County, Georgia. So I only think that challenge of a lack of affordable units is only going to get worse over time as the economy continues to contract. So I won't ramble on. It's pretty clear to me that we need the National Infrastructure Bank now more than ever to help us provide additional funds to help us care for and maintain our communities. I'm excited to announce tonight that I'll be preparing a proclamation to be considered by the Gwinnett County Board of Commissioners to support the NIB. I ask that all local leaders on this call join me in passing some kind of proclamation resolution to help gain support for this important effort. If you have any questions to myself or about any of the information I covered tonight, please shoot me an email at kirkland.carden@gwinnettcounty.com. I'd be happy to follow up with you and talk with you more offline. Thanks again for having me.
Kirkland, thank you very much for that great presentation. And as you accurately point out, housing is just a crisis that is across the nation, challenging all of our communities and must be addressed. And Thank you for pointing that out. In addition to Senator Wilcox, I neglected to point out and mention previously, worried about the privatization of public infrastructure, which we are greatly concerned about, and is a concern that we think threatens our public communities. Our next speaker is President of the Ravenna City Council in Ravenna, Ohio. We're happy and pleased to have Rob Karras present tonight. And Rob, thank you for joining us, and we're very pleased that you have done so.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm humbled by all the expertise here tonight and the wonderful stories. This is a different perspective. I'm the president of council of a small city in Ohio. We have a population of 11,000, and we are the county seat. Now, I'm not going to go through a whole list of all of our infrastructure needs. I kind of want to just tell you a story about what's happened recently in Ravenna and express our need for a national infrastructure bank. We already did pass a resolution. It's been forwarded on to David Joyce, who is our House representative. And we certainly hope it gets some traction in the House and passes and becomes a reality. So the first thing I want to mention is we've had some interesting planning efforts in the recent past. And one of them is we need a new fire and police buildings. Now, you're going to say, well, is that infrastructure? I bring it up because we're going to have to get money to do it. You know, we've already bought land. We've already paid architects to design these buildings, but the actual cost to build them is going to be about $20 million. And what we're going to have to do is go to our residents and ask them to help fund this through a tax levy. And our residents have been very kind and generous to do so. In the past, for example, we've passed an income tax levy that helps pay for improvement to our roads. So that's one area of infrastructure we've already covered, and we have a steady stream of revenue to pay for the improvement in our roads and our sidewalks. But we're going to have to go to them again to build the police and fire buildings. And I mention that because our avenues for finding funding to pay for these projects are limited. And so if we already have that initiative in place, when I tell you some of the infrastructure needs we have, where do we go now? We can't go back to the residents again and ask them to pay even more, although we may have to in some form ask them to pay for higher fees. So let me tell you what happened in Ravenna last August. We had 2 significant rain events within 2 weeks. Now you might ask, well, why am I calling them rain events? I'm not a meteorologist or anything. If I called them storms, that would be an understatement. There was so much rain that fell in such short period of times that most, including myself and my neighbors, had our basements flood. Now I was lucky. The 2 times our basement flooded, it was measured in a matter of inches. We had a segment of our city where the measurement of water flooding their basement was done with feet. So they had this enormous investment in cleaning up their basements. They lost their appliances, washers and dryers, for example. And by the time they got finished doing that, a few weeks later, the same thing happened again, and they had to replace again appliances, thousands of dollars. And we're told that these kind of events happen once in 100 years. And yet they happened within a single month to our residents. So our engineers did a little deep dive to figure out, no pun intended, by the way, what was going on, if there were problems. And of course, we have an aging infrastructure for our stormwater system. And they did come up with a solution that helped one area of our city, where they would build a new lift station and then develop piping to our wastewater plant for about a mile. We've already approved $500,000 for a consultant to build that or to plan that project. Because you know that when it comes to infrastructure, you have to pay a consultant first to develop the plans, and then you have to pay for the project. So it's $500,000 just to get the plans, and who knows how much it's going to cost. A rough estimate, or maybe a better guess, is maybe $4 or $5 million. And we're hoping that will help prevent this kind of thing from happening in the future. I recently visited our wastewater treatment plant, and we had a study done there from yet another consultant. This wastewater treatment plant goes back to the 1940s. And when I visited there, there's still equipment in operation from when it was built. And it's interesting when you see, as an elected official, because I am by no means an expert or a civil engineer or anything, but you can see as an average person, you know, the crumbling of cement and the dilapidated conditions are obvious. You can see them with your eyes. You don't have to be an expert. But the study that the consultant did came up with a rough figure of about $23 million. Now, I know people are talking about billions of dollars in this meeting, but $23 million to a small city like ours is a real significant investment. And trying to figure out, you know, where we're going to get that money is a big concern for me and our other elected officials. So we're faced with a dilemma. On the one hand, you know, we see the need. We don't know where the money is. And we're also faced with this other dilemma that this deferred maintenance has its cost. You know, if we can't come up with the money to pay for the improvements, then we have to keep plugging the holes. We have to keep, you know, fixing the dilapidated equipment and infrastructure we have. And we've seen the charts. Those costs keep going up and up and up. And there's a breaking point. At what point, you know, would we be spending more money on deferred maintenance, you know, trying to keep what we have operational, as opposed to paying the debt on something that would improve everything and have a more lasting benefit? And I don't know if we have a good answer for that. All I know is our crisis, the crisis we're going to be facing, is where do we get the money? How do we pay for this? Like I said, I didn't want to go into some of the other, because we have housing issues as well as the county seat. You know, we have a lot of residents who live here because it's close to social services that they need. But we're at a loss for low-income housing. And because our city is somewhat landlocked, we don't have a lot of land for development. So we have a lot of challenges in there. And then there's the strategic stuff. I didn't join city council 9 years ago to you know, help plug the dam. I wanted to do interesting things. There's been talk about broadband expansion. That's been an initiative that I've been interested in. And we miss opportunities when we don't have readily available funds. Twice, because of our geographic location, Amtrak has come to our city and offered to build a passenger depot, which would be a great economic boost to our city. But it was a $1 to $2 million investment, and we just didn't have the money lying around. So, you know, we miss those opportunities when we don't have access to funds. And I know this sounds like pittance compared to some of the other stories we've heard tonight, but it's the reality. And there are cities like Ravenna all over the country, and they're, you know, I'm not giving you an extreme example. I'm giving you the typical example. You know, this is what our country is facing. And I'm not an economic expert, or I don't know what I don't know the deep details of how this National Infrastructure Bank works. I just know from relying upon all the experts here tonight that it's an option we certainly want to have available to us. And without it, there's not too many other options available. I'll just end by saying, you know, I know some of us, some of the presenters are a little bit younger than some of the others, but there used to be a commercial on television. I think it was for like, you know, a car part or something. And it was basically, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. The implication is, okay, you can fix it now and get it right for a certain cost, or you can wait until it's such an expensive cost that you're not going to have a good way to pay for it. So I'll leave you with that note.
Rob, thank you very much for that presentation, which was excellent. And it's interesting how these common themes keep arising, such as a housing crisis and delayed maintenance being burdensome budgetary challenges that more and more governments are unable to confront and address. Our next speaker is Randy Voller from North Carolina, who has worn many hats throughout his career, including president-elect of the Orange Chatham Association of Realtors and the former mayor of Pittsboro, North Carolina. He's been a developer, a government official. He understands how the system works and what the challenges are. And Randy, welcome to our program tonight, and we're anxious to hear you speak. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jack. Rob, I really thought your story was heartwarming and echoed my experience with rural mayors. In fact, Mayor James, I was good friends with the mayor of Durham, Raleigh, Chapel Hill, and some of them also went on some of those junkets that you did with the metropolitan mayors. We all work together. When you're a mayor, you're essentially leading your community, and there is no partisanship in potholes or fixing water or sewer, doing any of this. It's all basic infrastructure that we need to keep a community running, to keep a place where people want to live, to actually have a community that works for everybody. With all this obsession with going to Mars, which will cost trillions and trillions of dollars, they're looking for water. And we know, Rob and Sly, that everyone wants good drinking water. And the only way to get it is to have investment to actually create the infrastructure to produce it, which takes money. And my experience in working with the state and federal government here has been that we can get the money if we can get the bonding capacity, which is tricky. Because we all know what that's based on, Sly. But if we had an infrastructure bank, it would be a heck of a lot easier to get the money to actually put it to work in our communities. And so I'm going to give you a perspective from the North Carolina Association of Realtors, which plugs into national on legislative policy, because I sit on their board. On infrastructures, they believe that all communities need sound infrastructure. So this is right in there with what they say and talk about, and that growing communities need expanding infrastructure to thrive, which is exactly what Mayor James was saying. So the business community is squarely behind the need for all types of infrastructure. This isn't just water and sewer, it's broadband, it's public services, it's greenways, it's all the things as a mayor that you end up connecting with. And we know that we need this. And so recently, I was part of a study that we went to the whole state to look at the market. I was really inspired by my friend who was on a call before with from Gwinnett County. So we did a study of the state of North Carolina, which is another growing southern state, on housing. And we're going to need, we're projected to increase 5% in housing in the next 5 years. But we have a gap because we don't have the availability of housing. So nationwide, we're down about 4 million units. It's a problem. We have an inventory gap right now as we sit here in North Carolina of over 300,000 units for rental and over 440 for sale. And that's only growing. And of course, if we were to get behind squarely coming together an infrastructure bank, we could address the single biggest issue in all of our communities, which is providing affordable living options, which is housing. And without housing that's located strategically for people to feel good about themselves and go to work and do the things that they need to do in the community, we don't have a community. So I'm 100% behind this. I understand why we need it. I've run a water and sewer company that we've had. I've been in the development business for 30 years. Rob, when I was first elected mayor, I actually got a lot of votes because I went inside of one of our manholes we built, and one of my neighbors said, any mayor willing to get inside of a manhole has my vote. My wife hosed me down when I got home and burned the clothes. So that's a true story. But my attitude was, I never asked a man or woman who worked for me to do something I wouldn't do myself. And since they had all gone home on a Friday night and there was a problem, I just did it myself. Although I did smell rather rank for a week. So I'm just telling you that, in my view, if we can come together and do this, this is one issue that the chamber, different groups that I'm connected with, realtors, builders, the Chamber of Commerce, even things as diverse as our environmental friends that I work with, they all understand the need for this. Everyone could unite on this because this puts people to work, it fixes our communities, and it actually addresses needs at home as opposed to something that's more esoteric and abstract in terms of we're funding something far away. So I'm hoping that the more calls, I've done many calls now with these guys that we do, the more successful we can be in pushing this, and we can get our policymakers to focus on things that are positive and build our country as opposed to never ending things that become partisan and distract people and we don't get ahead. I want to get ahead. I don't have that many more years left. I'm younger than a lot of you, but I'm not that young. And I would like to live long enough to see a new Tennessee Valley Authority. I'd like to see us building highways again, like my dad talked about and my grandfather talked about. I'd like to see us doing it so that my nieces and nephews could talk about, oh, I was there when Uncle Randy helped do this as one small part, as part of a big group. I'll tap out there, Jack. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy, as always. Next, we're going to have another economist speak from my home state of Pennsylvania. Paul Johnson, who's an assistant professor of marketing and management at the Montgomery County Community College, and also, I believe, lives in Delaware County, and correct me if I'm mistaken, and is involved with local government there that I will touch upon a little bit later after his presentation. Paul, welcome tonight. We're so happy to have you join us, and we're anxious to hear your comments.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. My name is Paul K. Johnson. I'm not an economist, but I do teach marketing, management, entrepreneurship, and also sports marketing. In my role as a professor at a local community college, one of the things I stress upon our students is that our country has transitioned to a service economy. However, we could see during the pandemic the importance of supply chain logistics, being able to move products from one place to the other and using our transportation system to do that. So the transportation system is vital to our economy. In 2022, the Fern Hollow Bridge collapsed. Maybe you guys saw that in Western Pennsylvania. And it was shortly after, I think, a presidential visit, and a bus got trapped on the bridge. Fortunately, everyone survived. And I'm in Delaware County, which is adjacent to Philadelphia. And maybe you saw the I-95 ramps and bridge in Philadelphia in a very central portion of the city caught on fire and collapsed. And fortunately, we were able to get that repaired in about 2 weeks on a temporary basis, and then took a little bit longer on a permanent basis. So I do stress the importance of the infrastructure, especially with the supply chain logistics as far as moving products and services and people throughout the economy. The consumer spending, which was mentioned earlier, tends to range from 65 to 70%. And as we saw from some of the earlier economists, consumer sentiment as well as consumer spending is down. And we could use this National Infrastructure Bank to help boost the economy. So in Delaware County, I am a recently elected Prospect Park Borough Council person. I also serve on the board of a government authority that distributes grants to nonprofit organizations as well as first responders. And I'm also on the Delaware County Authority. That's a financing pass-through entity that helps hospitals and universities build buildings on their campuses. I'm also involved with the Affordable Housing Centers of Pennsylvania. I'm the chair of that organization, which helps to provide services to reduce housing insecurity. We don't build anything, but we provide financial counseling and other services to make sure that people stay housed the best that we can. But just looking at Delaware County and looking at my community, I'm just going to point a few things out. We noticed some broadband gaps during COVID. You probably heard the stories of people having to drive to Starbucks or McDonald's and sit in their car in the parking lot. There were some grants that were available through ARPA that were passed through the Commonwealth. We did apply for one, but unfortunately we weren't approved for that grant. But there are some gaps even in our blue collar kind of inner ring collar community of Philadelphia. We have some broadband gaps. We have a famous road through our municipality where there's a dip, and then there's a SEPTA and Amtrak bridge over it, and trucks are always hitting that bridge. It's on Lincoln Avenue, and it even has its own Facebook page. So we're working with federal and state authorities to try and see if we can come to some resolution of that. But I know that there was some in the past administration, there was something about maybe making more steeper bridges so that more trucks can get through. There have been flood resilient issues throughout Delaware County. I used to live in a section of Philadelphia called Eastwick, which was built on top of a landfill, which is next to a marshland, and it's also next to the airport. So it's overdeveloped, and there's a Darby Creek there that exits into the Schuylkill River, which eventually exits into the Atlantic Ocean. And maybe this section is too overdeveloped. There's been discussion of possibly building some dams, but maybe the long-term solution is to actually relocate over 1,000 households to higher land, because the water line is creeping closer into Philadelphia in this section of Philadelphia, including the salt line as well. There was talk about sewer and wastewater treatment challenges on this call. We have a municipality, it's the only city in Delaware County, Chester City, which is a distressed city at this time. But they're exploring selling their water entities, their water authority and their stormwater authority because of possible bankruptcy. And it would just be a shame to take another public entity out of the hands of the public and put it into corporate hands where we know that the utility rates aren't guaranteed. Oftentimes they're more than the rate of inflation and usually surpass the rate of publicly owned utilities. We have an airport. It's one of the busiest airports, and it's always being expanded and modernized. So there's opportunities there. And we have a famous route through Delaware County called the Blue Route. And in Delaware County, it's 2 lanes. But for some reason in Montgomery County, it's 3 lanes. So there's always bottlenecks. They're looking at maybe allowing cars to ride on the side, the shoulder, which a lot of cars do illegally, but they're thinking about expanding that. And if you've ever been to Philadelphia, gone to any of the sporting games, if you've been on the I-76, also known as the Schuylkill Expressway or the Schuylkill Expressway because of accidents, that and our Roosevelt Boulevard are 2 of the most dangerous highways, and there could be some infrastructures in those. And lastly, we're an old community, so we have a lot of school districts that are older, and the buildings are just outdated. The buildings are 80, 90 years old, and the HVAC systems are just antiquated. So I am in full support of this national infrastructure bill for the bank, and look forward to taking advantage and kind of advocating for it in my walks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paul, for your presentation. Next, we're going to go to some questions, but I'd like to engage some of our excellent panelists that have already presented on a couple topics just to have a conversation. Undoubtedly, local elected officials understand the basic elementary needs of infrastructure. and the challenges that it faces, and the local governments have to balance a budget. Paul, you know, in Delaware County that some of the public infrastructure assets are being considered to be sold, and some states have already done that. I believe Chicago has sold their parking meters to to private holders, and along with Scranton, PA, I believe. Senator Wilcox, you mentioned this concern in your presentation. I'm interested in, Paul, first, your perceptions about that challenge, and Senator Wilcox, your thoughts and comparing your experiences in Illinois with those in Pennsylvania. Paul?
Sure. Well, I'm pleased to pleased that our county council, which is similar to Commissioner Carton's in his role on council in Georgia, they have committed not to sell our nursing home asset. So I'm very pleased about that, because that still remains under public hands. But the city of Chester, they're in dire straits. I don't know what's going to happen with that they're working through that with the receiver. There's also been a offer for another entity called Delcora that would kind of somewhat fill a budget gap within Delaware County, but that would just be a one-time infusion of cash. And there was some pressure to do that, but that was a deal made on it was a negotiation under a previous council, and that was blocked. So I'm glad that our current Delaware County Council is not exploring that sale. So I think anytime that we can keep these utilities under municipal control or government control, I think it benefits the taxpayers and the service users.
Thank you, Paul. Senator Wilcox, your thoughts and opinions on this?
Yeah, so the pressures that I've seen, we had a nursing home at our county level that's been discussed. I don't think that's a serious one, but water systems certainly looking to be sold to private entities. The one that scares me, wastewater and sewer, because I'm not convinced private ownership will have the impetus to fix issues like government and elected officials would. You mentioned parking meters in Chicago, parking garages and spaces. So I think the concerns here are, one, the municipalities aren't going into it naive. They understand the age of their infrastructure, the potential cost in the out years, and it's politically difficult to raise those water and sewer fees and everything. But once that private industry takes over, the question of who comes out when a main breaks or you have issues, or the customer's really at the behest of a industry that I can't say I think has customer service as a high requirement. Profit certainly becomes that driving factor in most cases. So private industry, especially with a water or sewer system, if now you're going to be stuck with public health issues, your local municipality is going to have costs that they don't have a control over. And it just seems to be a bit short-sighted there. We've seen bills in the Illinois General Assembly both that encourage that sale or give approval for it, and others that try and preclude it, none of which I believe have had enough support in either case to be passed. But the discussion is certainly out there, and I'm not sure that those making the decisions are in that best spot. And I would prefer that it must go to referendum if you're going to get rid of a public asset that has been paid for by the residents and the taxpayers for decades. So that's kind of my take on it. Not sure if I'll get that through the General Assembly, but those are my concerns.
Thank you, Senator. Alphecca, if you could make a few comments on this subject, and then we'll go to Sly James for his perspective, and then Walt McCray for comments. Alphecca.
Sure. So this was one of the concerns we had when we were formulating the legislation for the National Infrastructure Bank in the first place. We want mainly to lend to public entities for infrastructure which they own. And we also want to have the flexibility to lend to what is essentially a public service, but might be privately owned. For example, the case of ports or airports or privately owned transit authority or anything like that. So we want to be able to include that as well. But we've seen a lot of adverse outcomes from privatization, anywhere from just selling a perfectly good water company in order to fill your budget hole, to selling a water company that's under severe distress because it hasn't got the funding for maintenance. We look at this more as a big higher development development challenge for an area. There's nothing is not related to the other. When you're going to fix a stormwater system, for example, you have to coordinate with roads because 20% of stormwater systems are part of road enhancements. And so the two have to go together. So, and what we're really doing is we want to do more community development to lift these poorer areas out of poverty, and it can be done with a good community development thrust. And I would really like to, when we get around to it, I would really like to ask Mayor James if he could give some more examples of how you bring a city like Kansas City up to make it a #1 smart city. That's a great challenge, and a great achievement. And that's where we all want to go with this National Infrastructure Bank lending. We want to, formulate it in such a way that we don't have to privatize, that we can do smart development, that we can fix everything at once, and we can raise our labor force in the process and better, raise property values and those kinds of things at the same time.
Mayor
Alphecca,
James.
before you go to him, could you answer one question?
Sure.
I couldn't imagine privatization of a water system in a major urban area being a concern, but I could see, and I don't know what my size set would be, a rural community, 5,000, 10,000, where privatization of a water system ultimately had the intent of letting it deteriorate to the point where every resident would move out and you could secure that land cheaply to then redevelop. And what protections would a community like that even have in those cases?
So the main protection in our bill is there is a clause in there: we will not lend NIB lending for any project that privatizes something that is publicly owned. That's right there. But you are right to be very wary, because there are buckets and buckets of money out there in hedge funds and Wall Street companies and private equity firms that are ready to pounce on anything from a power company to a water company to buying up housing to commoditize it. And they're not interested in the servicing their clients as much as they are interested in making a real strong buck out of the deal. They want to make profits, and that's a cause for concern. There's whole books written on this on Amazon, and it's something to be concerned about.
Mayor James, and then Walt.
All right. First of all, let me echo something that Randy said, and that is that potholes and things of that nature have no political affiliation. Another good thing about mayors is that mayors don't really tend to pay a whole lot of attention to politics too, because we are all settled with the same problems. So Rob, although you said on a number of occasions that you compared your plight to those of bigger cities, let me just tell you, my friend, all cities have the same problem. It's just a matter of scale, and your scale and your problems are as huge to you as ours were to us. We were approached, I don't know how many times, about selling our water system. And the reason that we were approached was because we were getting it not only in terms of the bad repair of the system and the problems with flooding and wastewater, but also because we were under an EPA unfunded mandate as a result of a consent decree to repair all of this stuff, which then resulted in huge rate increases to the consumer, which then drove a lot of turmoil and argument. And they came in and offered it to us as, this is a way to solve your problem. Look at all the things you can do. If you don't have to deal with this, we'll pay you out. And in looking at that, one of the first things that I did as a mayor is I called other mayors who I knew had done something like this and said, how did it work out? And one of the first things I learned is that one city was in the process of trying to buy their system back because it had been so horrible, and they were having to pay more to get it back than they had received when they sold it. I think there's all sorts of stories about the parking meter thing in Chicago that didn't go well. Governments and private business can be partners, but they have different motivations. Business wants to make money. It's real hard to make money on old systems unless you're charging more for it. And then you have no control over it, but the citizens of the city will hold the government responsible for the problem. We got into the smart city aspects by serendipity to some extent. Google was a boon for us in a number of ways. And there's a lot of things that went into it. First, because of Google, and the same time we were laying streetcar, we had some confluence of interests. One, we had to tear up infrastructure to build a streetcar, but in the process of tearing up the infrastructure, we decided to go ahead and replace the underground water pipes and things of that nature and conduit at the same time, so that if something happened below the surface, we wouldn't interrupt streetcar. So in the process of laying fiber on such a long stretch and being a open data city and governing by fact and data, which was well known at the time, we had businesses, companies, 3M, IBM, all sorts of tech companies coming to us saying, could we use your line? Could we use your fiber to test our products? And so as a result of them being able to do that, we extracted from them things that would help us. For example, we have kiosks along our streetcar line that are basically big iPads. So you can punch in and find out where the nearest restaurant is. You can call the police from there. You can do all sorts of things from there. In our city, you can use our open data to determine how many people are likely to be standing on a street corner at 6 o'clock at night if you want to open a restaurant, to determine when to have your sale. So all of those things inure to the benefit of business. And the smart city aspects are absolutely fabulous. It's one of the things that we integrate now on our smart bus lines. It's one of the things that's going to run the entire length of the streetcar line. We have free Wi-Fi in downtown areas and along the entire streetcar line. And the reason that we wanted that was because our bus lines that also take part in the smart city initiatives run through some of the poorer parts of town. So if it's Wi-Fi along the entire bus line, that is available to citizens who live near that bus line to tap into, because still poorer parts of the community, rural parts of the community are falling behind in terms of connectivity. And if you're not connected these days, then it's kind of like having a rotary phone. It's even worse than having a flip phone, because you're simply having no opportunity to connect with the outside world in a meaningful way, to access services and things that you need. All of these things come down to leadership and to recognizing what is really important and what connects us. Infrastructure connects everybody every day, all the time. One form of infrastructure or another. And to the extent we do not pay homage to that basic fact, and we allow things to separate us. So, Rob, out in where you're at, don't worry, brother. I know you're up against the wall on what you need to do, but good luck with it. And an infrastructure bank would help you. And Randolph and Randy and Kirkland, all of the things that you talked about as well are absolutely part of this, which is why we need to get over this partisan nonsense and start looking at what's good for the American people and what will unite this country. And not only that, if there's a business interest, this is good for business. There is no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And when I found that I wanted to do something that was based in equity or would have an equitable effect, I found that the only way to really sell it was to show that you could make a buck off of it. So we have to show not only the need, but the benefit and the payoff to those who would have an interest in supporting it, and how it profits for them.
Mayor James, thank you so much for those exceptional perceptions and perspectives that are right on. Walt, you're next in line. If you could speak a bit to the Bucks County, Pennsylvania issue with regard to privatization. And then after you speak, Randy, you'll be next. Walt, thank you.
Well, okay. Thanks very much, Jack, and hello, everyone. I wasn't expecting to speak tonight, but I've enjoyed listening to everybody's testimony, especially the elected reps from on the locales. The common thread here, there are many common threads, but the one that strikes me is that that there is a piece of infrastructure that's missing primarily that we're all dealing with, and that is that our banking system is designed around private profits. And so the public banking matrix or model is what the National Infrastructure Bank models illustrates, is that when people put their money together, there are a variety of different ways of funding projects. Right now, municipalities and states typically have to have to go to capital markets, bond markets, and so forth. So the cost of infrastructure is doubled. That's what we've seen. So that the money that leaves the town is leaving the local economy. So, and I think that because what we saw in the Reconstruction Finance era, when the big government said, okay, we're going to do this, we're not going to see that for a couple of years. That's not the tenor of the national political setting for infrastructure. We have to keep pushing for this federal position. But I also think that the mayors and the local leaders can start to might think more creatively about how we can pool our money in a public banking matrix to do what the NIB wants to do, and that is to invest in our local economies with local dollars. I'm going to leave that open like that, just by saying that I think that this is a time for creative thinking about our money infrastructure, our banking infrastructure, and the importance of keeping it on the local, made out of the local resources and assets. Yeah. As far as Bucks County is concerned, Jack, we had when the people stood up and took over, stood up against the privatization, against the very big water authority, they won, and they were very clear that privatization was not in their interest. So that's I'll leave it at that. It's a good story to wrap.
Thank you so much, Walt. Randy, you have the floor.
Yeah, Jack, just want to speak a bit about infrastructure and privatization. One of the biggest companies on the private side of utilities, I think, is based in Philadelphia, Aqua America, and I've worked with them in this state. Generally, they get involved with developments that are in counties outside of the reach from municipal water and sewer. The challenge that you find, and I'm not laying this to defeat Aqua America, just when you put in private systems, are twofold. One, you don't have a democratic process in dealing with the rate issue. So as Mayor James and others were talking about, yes, it can be challenging when you have to raise the rates, but at least there's a democratic process to redress this. When you have a private entity and they raise the rates, it's essentially an oligopoly or a monopoly, and there is no way to redress it. We had a case where we were selling water wholesale to a large golf course community of about 800 people, mostly large, huge McMansions, and it was being purchased by a private entity that then took our rate and quadrupled it, so that when it reached their user, the users were inflamed. They were in my jurisdiction with the Pittsboro zip code, but they weren't voters in my city. So they were angry, but there was no way for them to deal with it. And essentially they were locked into this permanent contract, because in utility world, it's hard to actually have competitors crop up because of the expense and what you're dealing with to compete. Same with energy. So Duke Progress, they're managed by our utility commission in North Carolina, but essentially they're a monopoly. So I've been very loath to get behind the train of privatization for services that everyone in our town needs, or our community, for precisely the fact that there's no way of dealing with never-ending rate hikes. Or in the case of large communities, because I am a developer and we look at these things, let's say you have a community of 2,800 people, and I'm giving you a real world example, I just won't name the community. They have a sewer system. if you have a town with that many households, so 2,800 households, like over 5,000 people on a property of 1,300 acres, you're going to have more than one Mayor James water and sewer person handling it. But the law allows them to have one person can be an hour away to come and deal with a sewer leak, or what we like to call shit geysers, because they had force mains and they'd explode a volcano of effluent. And now they're waiting 45 minutes for someone to show up. In my town, if the situation occurs, we're on in about 10 minutes. See, these are the challenges, because what they don't tell you, they'll say, we're going to bring new technology to the problem, but they don't bring people to the problem. And without having people there to handle the maintenance instantly, you can have water leaks go on for 30 minutes, and you can have a situation where, I mean, basically an effluent geyser that's just gushing out of the ground with no one to shut it off. So I'm very wary of, I'm not opposed to private systems when it's the only option, especially out in a county that's unincorporated, but I am not in favor of them, you know, for municipal. And I have no doubt, Mayor James, they approached you multiple times, because I know a lot of people in that business, because they get the advantage of depreciation on their profit and loss statement and balance sheet, which we do not do, even though we report with a proper P&L and proper accounting system. Municipalities are nonprofits. We don't get depreciation for tax treatment, and they do. And that is the reason they want to do it, because they can shelter their profit through the depreciation of the assets that you sell them. They don't tell you that, but that actually is why they want the systems. Also, they want the cash flow, and the cash flow is permanent, and invariably the prices go up. I can bore everyone. I know a lot about this topic, Jack. I can bore them on this, but I can tell you, you should be opposed to it, because it takes the bottom 50% of your town, or even bottom 80%, and puts them in a position of never-ending rate hikes where they have no way of stopping the rate hike. And what happens when grandma gets her water and sewer cut off and can't pay the bill? In my town, we can work with that. But when it's a private entity, they don't work with you. They just shut the water off. And that's it.
Randy, thank you. Those are excellent perceptions, and agree with them wholeheartedly. We're almost ready to wrap things up. However, we're going to give Ellen Brown just one final opportunity to make a closing comment, if she would like, before we wrap things up. Ellen?
Well, this has been really interesting. I'm inspired to write about the problem of, I mean, I write articles and I've written a lot of books, so I'm inspired to write about the problem of privatizing municipal things. But anyway, so the public bank, or sorry, the National Infrastructure Bank is probably our only way out of the current crisis. We're obviously, China is running circles around us. They've built enough high-speed rail to circle the globe now in a mere, I think, 15 years. And how did they do it? They have 3 massive infrastructure banks, and we need to do the same.
Thank you, Ellen. Next, we're going to post our mobilization slides and urge all of our attendees here tonight. The Congress was out of session recently, where that is the opportunity for them to conduct town halls throughout the country, and they will be out of session again for the Easter break, and we urge all of you to attend those meetings, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican in the congressional district, and that you hand out National Infrastructure Bank flyers that you can print from our website in order to inform people about what our idea is. And believe me, I've been working on this for several years, and the more people that you explain and tell about how this process works, the more convinced they become that this is the means and the manner by which our country needs to go to rebuild itself together again. Here's a sign up to have contacts be obtained when you're attending these events, so that we can place them on our email list and expand our network. and convince more and more people. Also, please go to our website. We'll have updates with regard to the legislation that we're promoting, with the contacts that we have with the individual presenters that we've had tonight, and any other recent developments. Last but not least, please consider and make a donation to the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition. We run on a shoestring, and your contributions are effectively used. We have had a huge impact with a minimal amount of financial backing, and the more that we obtain, the better we're going to be able and more quickly convince Congress and the country at large that this is the direction that all of us need to go in order to mutually benefit each other and have an economy that is great. Last but not least, I see Ingrid has her hand up, and before we sign off, we'll just let you speak as to your issue.
Hi. Yeah, no, the senator had asked a question about wages, and I think we should let them know how what we think about the wages, you know, the Bacon Davis wages. And I don't explain it as well as you do, but I think maybe that was one of his questions. He had another question that I thought we already know the answer to that we should answer.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'm going to toss that to Alphecca for you to address. Thank you.
So the bank is really configured not only to build infrastructure, but to really reach the working class. That's something that neither elected party was successful in the last election in addressing, nor do they have a platform for doing it now. This National Infrastructure Bank is the only platform. And how exactly does it reach the working class and solve the income inequality problem in the United States? The first way is it requires in all contracts and loan agreements that workers that are hired up to do this work must be paid high prevailing or Davis-Bacon wages. That'll put more money. They'll be working now and getting retraining in these certified fields. And that's one of the things that we really need to push with the National Infrastructure Bank is to reorient our entire workforce. We need to get them out of these low-paying service jobs. If they think that everything can be computerized or fixed with AI, let the AI make the French fries. But we need to get these people into great-paying jobs and get them certified up, and that will help them on their income end. And then the other way that we'll be helping these workers is by lowering the cost of living for them, at lower transportation costs, especially lower housing costs. All of this building cities so that they're not wasting all their time in traffic jams or living 50 miles away. My plumber lives 50 miles away from my home near Washington, D.C. So even school teachers can't afford to live near where they teach school. This is something that we really can work on. It's possible. So we need the economic boost from the bank. We need the retraining boost from the bank, and we need to get people into great paying jobs.
Thank
So,
you, Alphecca.
one of the
Yes.
questions, and this comes up in Illinois with prevailing wage. Prevailing wage in Illinois is updated almost monthly. Federal prevailing wage often can be 2 or 3 years behind. So will federal prevailing wage be the ceiling, or will it be state prevailing wages? And especially when we're doing regional projects that cross state lines, what happens when there's varying prevailing wage or no prevailing wage aspects in that situation? Will we try and regulate that in the language of the bill, or will that then be the challenge of the project manager overseeing that regional aspect?
Yeah, we're going to have reporting that comes back from all these different aspects, and we'll have to figure out a way to best codify it in the agreement, in the loan agreement. And then we have our loan officers going back and checking up on it. So it's a whole host of things. Many states are not project labor agreement states. That is, they don't have a set description of jobs that you say it's an electrician at this journeyman, then he gets this much on a prevailing wage. So the level of the wage is one part of it, and then the description of the job is another, and then checking up to make sure that they're not hiring the electrician and then calling him a low-paid worker and cheating him out of his wages is a third aspect of it. So altogether, it needs a lot of work to make sure that we're paying fairly for work done, and that we are promoting and training our we need to use the latest technologies. It's not your dad's old infrastructure anymore that we're going to be building. So we need to have qualified signal people, electronics people in every aspect of the infrastructure that's being rebuilt. It's a big challenge, but it can be done, and it has been done before.
And so I'm a pretty straight shooter where I sit. There's the equivalent argument on the opposite side that prevailing wage laws tend to drive costs up. I'm not sure how often in Illinois, month to month, prevailing wage actually has declined. So it can be an inflationary pressure. One of the concerns is that in a strong union state, the unions spend an exorbitant amount of resources protecting the weakest employees. And that tends to bring the highest performing employees who decide that I'm only going to do what's expected, and you bring quality down. I support any union who focuses on having the best trained, best employed workforce, providing the best products. But nationally, I don't think you can argue that we have not built large scale projects in short timelines well for a long time. And so you do have that competing interest of how do you get the best infrastructure dollar with the taxpayer's best interests in mind, but yet it be also quality work. So it is a difficult rub. I have not looked at, Rep. Davis's bill enough to see which way it leans one way or the other. So I'll be curious to see a bill that gets filed. How does it resolve, unfortunately, that political rub that will be a player in this discussion?
Yeah, good quality delivery refers not only to the worker in the field, but also the management as well. I mean, a lot of private P3 projects have gone off track just because of poor maintenance. I mean, just because of poor management. An example is the Purple Line in Maryland that went way over cost and had to be, taken back as a public project. So good management is as important as these other things too. But we really need to work on our workforce. We're slipping backwards. We're going back in terms of technological advancement. There's been studies that have done comparisons with us and the rest of the world. We have a lot of ways to go. We need a strong Department of Education. That's not happening right now. The unions will train a little bit, but they don't do all of it. And we're cutting back on research and development. So we have a lot of challenges we have to work on.
Thank you, Alphecca. Thank you, Senator Wilcox, on your raising a very important issue that we will be working with as we move forward. I want to thank all of you who have attended tonight. I've personally thought it was an excellent presentation. Please go to our website to get updated with all the latest information and developments that we have. Also, check out and contribute. Money is the lifeblood of any kind of functioning operation. And we hope that you advocate for the bank with your neighbors, with your friends, with your elected officials, anyone that is involved with a local government and understands and appreciates what the difficulties are of infrastructure. Last but not least, I thought we had an excellent panel of speakers this evening who made excellent contributions to the understanding of the challenges of our infrastructure and the potential solutions that we must find and implement in order for our country to succeed economically and support the members of our country. So thank you, good night, and so appreciate you joining us.